I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah. That is what I heard them say way back in the day. I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah, yeah, yeah. But it seems like since that day, yeah, yeah, we have sorely changed. I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah, yeah. That is what I heard them say, yeah. Way back in the day. I'll be buried in my grave, yeah, before I become a slave, yeah, yeah, yeah. But it seems like since that day, yeah, we have sorely changed. Whoa. Hey, hey. Whoa, oh, 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 oh. Whoa, oh, 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 oh.
And now, live from beautiful Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, you're watching My Fellow Americans with your host, Spike Cohen.
Yes! Yes, thank you so much. Oh, yes, I'm here. It's me. Keep clapping. Clap for the Max Headroom miracle. How would we know that you wanted Max Headroom's miracle if you didn't keep clapping? Welcome to My Fellow Americans. I am literally Spike Cohen, and yes, this is my Max Headroom background. And every time I put it up, I hope that no one suffers any problems from having it in the background. But I do love it so, and I love you also. And thank you so much for tuning in tonight. We have a really cool episode. I can't wait to introduce this interview that we did. It is a pre-recorded interview, but I'm going to be in the comments watching you, stalking you, talking to you. Every comment you make, I will be there. And I'll actually be able to pay closer attention to your comment because I'll be watching the interview along with you. But anyway, we're about to have a lot of fun. This is a Muddy Waters Media production. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, everywhere. Check us out on all social media platforms, on all podcasting platforms. Check us out every single place that you can listen or hear or watch a thing. And while you are there, if you have not already done so, be sure to like us or subscribe to us or follow us or whatever that thing is that you do to be a part of our thing on that thing. Be sure to do that thing. And if that thing is YouTube, then don't just hit subscribe. Be sure to hit the bell as well, because I want your phone to explode with notifications every single time we go live. And of course, be sure right now, whether it's live or pre-recorded, if you are able to do so, share this right now. The last thing I want is for you and your closest loved ones to miss out on a libertarian podcast that's roughly an hour-ish long, about an hour and a half actually, about an hour or so long on a Wednesday evening. Give the gift of Spike Cohen today. Kids love it. And actually, it might not be Wednesday when you're sharing this, but I still don't want you to miss out. Kids love it. And of course, if you want to make sure not to miss out on anything that we ever do, then be sure to become a member of the... Man, we have to figure out what we're calling this club. The Muddied... Come join the Muddied subscribe. I'm going to play it again because I got distracted. Join the Muddy Waters crew by becoming a member by going to anchor.fm/muddywaters/subscribe. You get access to exclusive members-only content. You also get access to an ad-free listening and viewing experience on Spotify and Anchor. And coming soon, you'll have access to ad-free video viewing as well. And you will also get access to the Muddied Zoom, which is our monthly get-together on Zoom that we do. We just had another really fun one earlier this month. And you also get a discount at the Muddy Waters store, which is at muddywatersofreedom.com/store. So much you get. And I know what you're thinking, Spike, that price has to be, it's like $150 a month that's got to cost to be able to get access to all of that. Would you believe that it's less than $150 a month? Would you believe that it's less than $100 a month? Would you believe that it's less than, in fact, $50 a month? And yes, in fact, even less than $20 a month, and even less than $15 a month. For $9.99 a month, you get access to all of that stuff. Anchor.fm/muddywaters/subscribe. Subscribe today. We want you to become a member of our group. We have to come up with a name for it. Maybe if you become a member, you could come up with a name. Oh, also, we like you more if you join. There's that as well. This episode, of course, is brought to you by the Libertarian Party Waffle House Caucus, the fastest growing and second largest caucus in the Libertarian Party. Sick of the infighting? Sick of bland, do-nothing messaging from the Libertarian Party? Want to become a member of the takeover? Join the Waffle House Caucus because, we're not going to do anything about any of that, actually. But we are going to have fun, and we do a lot of fun stuff in there. So join the Waffle House Caucus by going to the Facebook group Libertarian Party Waffle House Caucus. Or you can become an official voting member of the caucus, which means absolutely nothing, because again, we don't really do anything other than have fun. But you can go to muddywatersofreedom.com/store, and you can buy some Libertarian Party Waffle House Caucus merchandise. The Gravy King, Joe Solosky. Joe is running for governor of Pennsylvania. Joe Solosky is the key to Pennsylvania's success. And if you'd like to help Joe become the first libertarian governor ever, and we're about to see what happens when we get libertarians elected to positions of power and influence. I don't want to bury the lead, but it's good. It's good. You should still watch it, but it's good. If you want to help him become the next guy that can come on the show and talk about all the stuff he's doing as Libertarian governor, the first one ever, go to joesolosky.com. That's JoeSoloski.com. Mudwater, the most appropriately named sponsor that Muddy Waters Media has ever had. If you woke up today and said, Spike, I am so sick of bland messaging from the Libertarian Party. Well, folks, I can't help you with that. We already established that. But what I can do is tune you into some really good coffee alternative, huh? That's what you need. Maybe you're a little too wound up. If you go to muddywatersofreedom.com/mud, you can get Mudwater Coffee Alternative, which is made out of these things: masala chai, cacao, mushrooms, turmeric, sea salt, cinnamon, and literally nothing else. Now I know what you're thinking. Spike, does that have any caffeine in it? Am I going to be able to stay pepped up but not get too wound up and not end up crashing or dying of some caffeine-related illness? Well, yes, that is exactly what will happen. A cup of Mudwater has about 1/7 of the caffeine of a cup of regular coffee. Just enough caffeine to get you all happy and pepped up and ready for the day like this. I'm ready for the day. But not so much caffeine that you end up crashing and dealing with heart disease and depression and addiction problems like this. I have addiction problems and heart problems. So go to muddywatersofreedom.com/mud and get your starter pack today. Defy the power and stitches and glitches. Sell some of the best tumblers I have ever seen, and I have quite a few of them, so I can speak from authority on this. They make the best quality tumblers, and they keep your hots hot, they keep your colds cold, they keep your lukewarms lukewarm, they keep pretty much whatever temperature you put your liquids in there. It will keep it at that exact temperature with zero variance for an ungodly number of hours. I don't remember the number of hours, but it was a lot. And also they do free customization for free. I know I already said free, but it's free customization. That's unheard of. I've never heard of such a thing. Well, I have with this. Outside of this, I haven't heard of this. If you ask me to customize something, I'm not doing it for free. I'm charging you, but they'll do it for free. So if you go to either Stitches and Glitches or defythepower.com, you can get tumblers, and they can use the code MuddyTumbler to get 10% off. But act fast, because it ends this month, and this time they mean it. Because last time when they ended it, and we kept forgetting and telling you, and then you would order stuff from them and use the code MuddyTumbler for 10% off, and they just kept doing it because they're nice. They're not going to do it anymore. They're not going to do it anymore after the end of the month. So use code MuddyTumbler, you get 10% off and free customization with or without the code. And that continues on even into March. Stitches and Glitches and defythepower.com. If you just finished listening to all these ads and said, Spike, I'm so sick of you, and I'm so sick of these ads, I'm leaving this grump, and I'm going to sue you. Well, good luck, pal, because if you're in Florida, I'm going to sue you back even harder with personal injury attorney Chris Reynolds, attorney at law. Yes, that's right, folks. If you live in the state of Florida and you've been personally injured, then you can contact personal injury attorney Chris Reynolds, attorney at law, by going to chrisreynoldslaw.com, and Chris will get you so much money. You'll never have to work a day in your life again when Chris Reynolds is done with you, as long as you've actually been injured. If you haven't been injured, he's probably going to tell you to get out of his office. But if you have been injured, oh, the money just pouring down to you. That's a direct quote. Chris Reynolds, pouring down on you. Okay? He's going to make it rain of your own money, but he'll take it and do that to you for free. If you don't want that, he'll just give you the money. He'll probably just give it in a check or a direct deposit or something. But if you want, Chris will get on the ladder, take all that money, and just sprinkle it down on you. chrisreynoldslaw.com. And for $50, I'll help him. Well, plus travel costs. I'll do it. You'll have so much money, it'll seem like a bargain at that point. A couple grand, bring me down. I'll do it. The intro and outro music to this and every episode of the, what is this show called? My Fellow Americans. We didn't do Muddy Waters of Freedom, so I'm still coping. The intro music to this and every episode of My Fellow Americans comes from the amazing and talented Mr. Joe Davi, Jodavi. Check him out on Facebook, SoundCloud. Go to his Bandcamp, jodavimusicbandcamp.com. No, jodavimusic.bandcamp.com. And you can buy his entire discography for $20-something. He just dropped a new album and a new single. His music is incredible. Just go over there. Give him money. Give him money, get his music. Money for music. Money for music. Joe Davi. Thank you so much, Joe Davi. I'd like to thank Lib Lib for this delicious water that I'm drinking on this episode. Always good water. Always Lib Lib. I want them to give me money. I've been doing this for a long time. Or just water. They could just give me the water at this point. Honestly. Bula Vanaka. Shout out to Tehran Turks' mom and him as always. I just can't wait. I'm going to go right into this. This guest is incredible. You are going to really enjoy this. If you sit there and go, okay, sure, libertarians are getting elected across the country, but what's that actually mean? Are they actually doing anything? Is there anything happening there? Why would I keep supporting this if I don't even, what are they doing? They go in there and they're libertarian, but are they actually I wanted to fight for liberty and freedom and fight against tyranny? I don't know why you sound like this, but you make a valid point. And I think you won't be asking that after looking at this episode. This is exactly what happens. This interview and the things that we talk about are exactly what happens when a libertarian gets elected to office. I don't even know how to intro. This is just watch it. This is incredible. I'm so happy. Check this out. Folks, my guest tonight is the elected sheriff of Santa Cruz County, Arizona. I'm having him on to talk about some issues that are happening locally in his area, many of which are issues that affect the entire country and many other regions of the country. Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Americans, please welcome to the show, Sheriff David Hathaway. David, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Spike, for inviting me. This is going to be an interesting conversation. I always enjoy listening to your podcast.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And I am happy to have you on. I can't wait to get into this. Folks, if you were tuning in, be sure to ask me your thoughts or ask me and Sheriff Hathaway. Give us your thoughts and questions, and we will tell you if you are right or wrong. Now,
I am
Sheriff
here. I will
Hathaway,
do that.
Before we get started, I always ask people when they first come on the show, this is your first time as a guest on the show, what is it that got you where you are right now? Was there an aha moment, or was it just a series of events that got you to decide to take this path in life? Everyone has a genesis story. Tell us the David Hathaway story.
Well, I grew up as a rancher, as a cowboy. We still have ranching property. My family has been in ranching since the 1800s in Arizona, since before Arizona became a state. Arizona became a state in 1912. So kind of that independent lifestyle, just kind of, always wearing a gun, riding around on a horse, it's instilled in me. And a lot of it was from my dad, very, very practical person, believed in, self-determination, and just once, in that ranching lifestyle, helped with that. What really cemented it for me is I was a management with DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, saw, Reagan's drug war in South America, saw the drug war throughout the United States, and just seeing the futility of that, you would think that people would have learned those lessons from alcohol prohibition, that they would seen that pattern repeating itself that results in, more laws, and it just continually expands. So that was kind of it for me. And then living here on the border, I've seen in my county in Arizona, we have the biggest ports of entry with Mexico of any county in Arizona, of the 4 counties that border Mexico. And we have the largest border patrol stations. The biggest one in the United States is in my county, and the 3rd biggest one in the United States. So I've seen kind of a lot of the abuses, the police state that has developed along the border, the lack of any need for probable cause or constitutional protections against search and seizure, the 4th Amendment being violated all the time. And kind of from seeing all that, talking about the aha moment, seeing all that, the failed drug war, and the kind of the abuses that happen along the southern border. I wrote a book talking about that subject, and I was fortunate enough to have Scott Horton write the foreword for it, and Will Grigg, rest in peace, wrote a blurb for the back cover of that book as well, discussing this whole crazy situation where CBP claims to have a 4th Amendment free zone within 100 miles of the border. And I get pulled over all the time, and I'm a big, tall gringo, 6'4", and, I don't look Hispanic or anything, but they give the same spiel to me. Like, I say, why are you pulling me over? They say, we don't have to have any reason. We have extended border search authority given to us by the Supreme Court of the U.S. Anywhere within 100 miles of the international border, we can pull you over for any reason, and we can search your car for any reason and detain you for any reason. And what's funny, Spike, is that 2/3 of the population of the U.S. lives within 100 miles of the border.
Yes.
You look at Los Angeles, Miami, New York. 2/3, 200 million people of the 335 million people that live in the U.S. live within this constitution-free zone.
I'm one of them.
So I kind of butted heads with libertarians that want to have state action in the immigration sphere. But in every other sphere of life, they want the state to wither away. They want voluntary arrangements, free enterprise, private interaction. But in that one area, I mean, there's just a few libertarians very vocal about this, that they still want the state involved in border enforcement and immigration. So that's why I wrote this book. It's a very niche book. It's only kind of for libertarians that are confused about the infighting within the libertarian world of why do we still need the state involved in border enforcement and immigrations, but we want it to go away in every other area. So that's kind of it, of the sort of the aha moment and sort of my progress, my journey towards, just thinking we only need to have a voluntary society. The invisible hand of the market can solve everything.
Absolutely. And this, by the way, and incidentally, as you mentioned, that 100-mile zone, the reason that 2/3 of the population fit within that or live within that 100-mile zone is, as you said, it's along any border. they call the shoreline a border because it's a
Yeah.
border with international waters. So I live
Yes.
in Myrtle Beach, which is, I don't know, thousands of miles from any, or at least 1,000 miles from the Canadian border, and more than that from the Mexican border. And yet, because I'm a few blocks from the ocean, the technically Border Patrol or anyone they deputize can detain me without any probable cause. If all they have to do is go to court afterwards and say, oh, well, this was because of immigration enforcement. This was a national security issue for
Yeah.
immigration enforcement. And it's
And
just,
and
it's insane.
and what kind of boggles my mind on all this is if you have, say you have a state-caused problem, you have a state-caused problem. As a libertarian, we shouldn't propose another state solution to a state-caused
Yes,
problem. And a lot of people will
exactly.
talk about, well, is there a welfare magnet to some people coming to the US,
Yeah.
even though most of them are coming here to work and they're less likely to apply for welfare benefits than native born Americans. But still,
Yes.
you know, there's that argument. Okay, well, what we should say is just end welfare, end the state program that's causing a problem. Let me give you an example of that. If we go back to the era of alcohol prohibition from 1920 to 1933, okay, we learned that that was a failed, disastrous effort. But what did it result in? It resulted in the first gang activity in the U.S., the first drive-by shootings in the U.S., they all Al Capone and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
So you know what they did? They said, you know, we need another state program to solve the problem caused by the first state program. And then we had the National Firearms Act in 1934. Remember,
Yep.
alcohol prohibition was from 1920 to 1933. There was a lot of violence, clashes between gangs and police, because when you drive an industry underground, it's going to produce violent encounters, violent interactions, which it did. You had the first drive-by shootings in the U.S., the first gang activity in the U.S. that was like violent, you know, criminal on criminal or criminal on police activity. So the response to that was they drafted the National Firearms Act of 1934, and that's when a lot of kind of weapons became illegal, full automatic weapons, you know, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns. And they thought, well, we need another state program to solve a problem caused by the original state program. So let's fast forward to now the immigration topic. So you have, let's say, a problem that is maybe partly caused by state activity by having welfare inducements to immigrate. The welfare inducements would be things like housing subsidies, Section 8 housing, food stamps, free public schools, free medical care, you know, things like that that are welfare inducements to immigrate. Now, what you shouldn't do is just say, as a libertarian, if you're going to be a principled libertarian, you shouldn't say philosophically that we need to have another state program called CBP to start pointing guns at people and throwing people in jail. What you should do is get rid of the original state program. Let me do another analogy. Like when I was management in DEA and the Drug Enforcement Administration. And I worked in South America for 8 years. I worked along the border. I worked in the Midwest, in Washington, Illinois, Missouri. But we noticed when I ran a drug task force in Illinois that the welfare checks came in on the last day of the month, and there was a big uptick in purchasing drugs, illegal drugs, cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin. You know, the old saying, idle hands is the devil's workshop. So you subsidize people with welfare payments. And when the welfare money came in, when the checks came in, there was a big influx of cocaine and methamphetamine that came into the area because the drug dealers, smart entrepreneurs, knew that there was going to be a big uptick in purchasing, in demand. So, you know, you could use that same logic from the Prohibition era and the firearms laws. You could say, well, we noticed that when the welfare money comes in, there's a lot more drug distribution that comes in, coincides with the welfare checks. So you know what you could say? You could say, let's create a drug war. Let's create another state program. Let's create something like DEA and drug task forces to go after these people who are exchanging substances, because we noticed that the first state program, the welfare subsidies are increasing the demand for drugs. So you could just say, well, how do we solve that? We don't end the welfare. We make a drug war to go after all the drug transactions that are happening with the the welfare money, the welfare subsidies. So
Yeah,
it doesn't make
exactly.
any sense to me that certain people, and they're great friends of mine, and I interact with them and I write articles for their websites, that they are anti-state in every other aspect of their being, but certain ones of them
Just
want
that.
state enforcement. They want guys to bust you in the head and point guns at you and throw you in jail on that one topic. And if you wouldn't mind me just reading a little bit out of my book there, and of course these
Sure.
aren't all of them. The ones that are this way are certain Austrian economists, but by no means not all Austrian economists. I believe in Austrian economics. I think it most fully and completely explains how human beings interact with each other. But if you would indulge me to read this, this is Bob Higgs, Austrian economist who has lived in Mexico for years, and he's on the correct side of the issue. He's talking about this analogy where people say you can invite or exclude anybody into your home, so you should be able to exclude anybody from a whole nation state. He says, with free entry by immigrants, I would be fully as justified and able to forbid their entry into my home as I am to forbid the entry of U.S. citizens. But I do not own your home. And should you wish to invite Albanians, Mongolians, or Siberians into your home, it is none of my business. And it would be an act of sheer impudence for me or my alleged agent, the government of the USA, to interfere with your hospitality. The analogy between one's home or other private property and the territory of the nation state is not simply overdrawn, but it is stupid. And he says, and equally stupid and utterly unworthy of anyone calling himself a libertarian, or even more so an anarchist, is the claim that until complete privatization is established over all property in the country, we can and should, as a second best resort, support the U.S. or state government's enforcement of exclusionary laws. So I think he nails it right on the head there, that if you're an advocate for liberty or anarchism, voluntary interactions, then how can you possibly say anything other than, get rid of the state? One of my favorite websites has in the tagline, it says anti-state. You see that on everything on the page. But some people say, well, we need the state in this one area. So it's kind of doesn't make sense to me.
No, it doesn't. And the thing is, like, the shorthand of it is saying, look at these sociopaths who created this terrible problem. I demand that they come up with a way to fix this problem, not by getting rid of the original problem, but by creating a new program. Surely they'll be able to fix it. It doesn't pass the sniff test, and it leads to. And I've had multiple debates where I've talked with fellow anarchists and fellow libertarians who are in favor of border enforcement. And what I always ask is, we see what this leads to. We don't have to guesstimate what a government enforcement of or state enforcement of a border would look like. We see what it looks like. It looks like everyone's rights being violated. It looks like raiding private workplaces and taking out workers and then putting them in $800 a day cages, which somehow is going to solve the welfare state problem. And we see all of this. We don't have to guess what it would look like. And if we say, okay, well, we don't want that, but we do want to be able to decide who is allowed or not allowed on our property or in our immediate neighborhood of consenting property owners. Okay, great. Then advocate for that. Don't advocate for the state to have this fortress state authority around us. And just as a side note, for those who are watching this, how much would you like to have your sheriff quoting Robert Higgs on the Libertarian podcast?
Next time I'm going to quote Hans Hermann Hoppe and Bastiat next. So
listen, go ahead. Anyway.
I love Hoppe, everything that he's written. Democracy, the God that failed, and all the other things in Rothbard. But Hoppe is one of the persons that is kind of quoted and referred to as advocating state enforced borders, which is really weird, because in my book, like I said, this is a really niche book, and it's all about the Austrian perspective of looking at the immigration and border enforcement issues. And it's called Immigration Private versus National Borders. Yes, we do have private borders around our own property, but how can you have some external influence, like let's call that influence Darth Vader. How can I have ranch property right here near the border. So why can't I invite Mexicans to either work or rent from me or something like that onto my property? Because it's my property. I can exclude or invite anybody I want. But what's the rationale for having a third party, like let's call him Darth Vader, that makes a second border around my private property borders and says, no, I am overriding your ability to invite or exclude whoever you want. I'm saying you can't invite these persons in. And since I mentioned Hoppe is one of the ones that people refer to on this issue as being in favor of the enforced borders, on everything else, he's really good. And if you use his own logic against him, like let me quote some things, like he says that any talk of society as an actor is meaningless. This isn't just his general writings, not on the immigration topic. He says only individuals act. Any talk about society as an actor is meaningless. So how can you speak of what all of society should want in the realm of border enforcement or iPads or what kind of tennis shoes you want to buy or what kind of food you eat or anything else? That's a central planning. That's a collectivist, a technocratic mindset that you need a technocratic elite to make macroeconomic decisions for the whole society rather than having microeconomic decisions being made by individuals, like what Austrian economists called subjective preferences. You don't know what the preferences are going to be of each individual until you let them act. Then you can see their demonstrated preference. But, Hoppe on all other areas, he says, any talk about society as an actor is meaningless. You can never talk about what society wants. Like you can never talk about what a whole nation wants. Only individuals act. And he says that you cannot aggregate the utility of what society wants. He says any talk about adding up the sensations of different individuals is to engage in an entirely meaningless exercise. So how can you say that everybody in a country, say the United States, doesn't want Mexicans or Albanians or Nigerians to either come, live on your land or rent a house from you or marry your daughter or you employ them or whatever? You can't say that universally 100% of the people in society, don't want people to come visit them on their property from some certain other country or culture. So you're overriding the will of the individual. And that's kind of the fallacy of democracy, is that you get somebody, a technocrat or a majority or somebody or voters to overrule the will of individual peoples. And and if I can refer to another thing that Hoppe talks about, I'm not sure, Spike, if you've heard of the Pareto test. The Pareto test of social welfare. You have Pareto superior, Pareto inferior, and Pareto optimality. What it is in economics terms, because this book of mine dissects how this is wrong. Economists, libertarian economists that use this argument, they're wrong. There's a transaction called a Pareto superior transaction. That means if two people voluntarily exchange something and at least one person benefits, that's called a Pareto superior transaction. Now, if one person is harmed and the other person is not harmed, that's called a Pareto inferior test. Now, the ideal is Pareto optimality. That means both people in the transaction, both sides of the transaction benefit from the transaction. So if we apply that test that Hoppe applies in other things he's written, the Pareto test of social welfare, if you look at the state involvement along the border, prohibiting work transactions, cultural visits, family visits, restricting people from inviting people onto their property from some other country. Well, that has clearly violated the Pareto optimality test. That's a Pareto inferior transaction. At least one side of that intervention has been harmed when CBP says you can't visit your family member in the U.S. or you can't work for this person in the U.S. So I know I'm kind of getting into the weeds there, and that's why this book that I wrote is a niche book. It's only for people who really can't understand the feud between libertarians on this topic. Like, why don't we just get the state out of all aspects of our life? And this analyzes it from the perspective of Austrian economics. And so it's, somewhat of a, I guess you could say, a dry book, a very niche book, but I wanted to refute this. And as I was exploring this, what Murray Rothbard wrote on this, what Heinz Hermann Hoppe wrote on this, as I did the personal exploration and read a lot of things and made a lot of notes, I thought, well, I'm going to turn it into a book because I was doing it to inform myself, but maybe other people would be interested in the arguments and the fallacies.
Yeah, absolutely. And what is the name of that book?
It's called Immigration, and the subtitle is Individual versus National Borders. So you can get it on Amazon or anything else. And if you email me a mailing address, Spike, I'll send you one. I should have sent you one before this, but it's in ebook form or print form. You can get it on Amazon, but I'll mail you a copy if you
I would love that. I can't wait to read that. So it's called Immigration, Individual versus National Borders, and by David Hathaway. And so no, listen, you have no argument from me. This has been an endless thing I've had. Actually, when I was transitioning away from being a conservative to a libertarian several years ago, the last statist bugaboo that I had to let go was border enforcement. This not even ration-based idea. Well, they at the very least need to protect our borders. Well, they're not ours, they're theirs, and they're the ones choosing what's being enforced. And why do they have to? And I realized after a while, any of the arguments I had for why, I no longer actually believed, because I was now a libertarian. I didn't believe that we needed government to protect us. I didn't believe that we needed government to make decisions for employers.
If you really are a voluntarist or an anarchist, you have to believe that the market can provide solutions for everything. Exactly. And if I can tell you, Spike, about a big risk that people don't know about, a big risk of the build the wall mentality, build the wall. Like, it's kind of funny that Republicans have flip-flopped on this. If you go back 25, 30 years ago, you can have Ronald Reagan making a speech in front of the Brandenburg Gate at the Berlin Wall, Iron Curtain, saying, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. You say that you are emerging from totalitarianism. You're emerging into freedom. Prove it. Tear down this wall, because walls are symbols of, dishonoring private enterprise and interaction. Exactly. So let me tell you something that's happening down here that your viewers probably don't know about, but I live right here on the border. Walls not only keep people out, but they keep you in. Like, and the East Germans noticed that they couldn't leave East Germany. Yes. You had to stay in your tyrannical thing. And you think, no, but that wouldn't happen here. No, it's already happened. 10 years ago, there was a pilot project in my town, and I have the biggest ports of entry with Mexico here in my county, in Santa Cruz County, Arizona. A pilot project where CBP officers began standing in the southbound lanes, in the outbound lanes, searching cars leaving the United States, going into Mexico, interviewing people, taking money, taking possessions as people left the US. So you saw that happening in East Germany, but people think, well, that wouldn't happen in the US. Well, when you make walls and you restrict the access points to the other country, I mean, those access points are also a safety valve to get away from tyranny. And there's a lot of expatriates that move from the United States to Mexico, to Mazatlan, Guaymas, San Carlos, different places south of here where they can get a nice house, very affordable, live on the ocean, but they want to take their stuff with them, or some people keep a house in the US and a house in Mexico. And so they can have that escape if things get so bad here. But now, when you're exporting your wealth, your gold coins, your money, they are, and that started as a pilot project 10 years ago. Now they have built permanent structures in the southbound lanes where officers are continually fully staffed, not just a pilot project, searching cars leaving the US and seizing money under civil asset forfeiture, not charging you with a crime. Where did you get this money? Prove that this is legitimate money. Prove that this is not money from drug trafficking. And so they'll take it, and then it's up to the individual to file what's called a claim and cost bond to actually prove that the legitimate source, come up with tax records or pay stubs or something to show that the money is legitimate. They'll take the money and not charge you with a crime and just let you go on your way. And I'm just going to talk about something that I was just interviewed on the local media. You won't be able to see this article, but I'm going to hold it up here. It says, Gate crashing wreaks havoc on Mexico-bound traffic at Mariposa. So what is this? This is an event that I had to do a lot of interviews with, that the cars going into Mexico are being stopped and searched by U.S. officials before they go into Mexico, and having money and assets taken away from them, and just turned loose and not charged with a crime. A car crashed through the gate going into Mexico, where the U.S. officials had put up a gate barring traffic from going into Mexico so they could search cars one at a time. This individual crashes through the gate, breaks the gate off its hinges, and then all the CB people descend on this individual like, he's the worst criminal in the world for just wanting to enter a foreign country. But the U.S. doesn't want to let him leave the U.S. until he's searched. So when I was a kid and I grew up here, I was born in this same town on the border. That would be unheard of, and you could at the very least leave the country between the borders. All it was back when I was a kid was a 4-strand barbed wire cattle fence, just a livestock fence between the U.S. and Mexico. You could just walk across the fence and go into Mexico. But if they succeed in building an impenetrable wall along the border, your only option for leaving will be to go through these ports of entry where they're now searching the cars and the people leaving the U.S. So if you didn't think that could happen, if you thought that's something of East Germany, that's happening now. That's one of the
right now.
Negative outcomes of walls. They not only keep people out, but they keep Americans in, or they keep people in the country.
Exactly. And it's a funny thing about walls is that they apply the laws of physics work both ways, and especially when there are people there with guns making sure that you stop at the entry and exit points. I'm glad to have you on, because one of my biggest things that I've been trying to say to libertarians, we focus a lot on like the White House, there's something that we really, we're not in a position to really be able to try to contend for, and we'll focus on like running for governor, running for Senate, and things like that. By the way, I say this as someone who ran for vice president in 2020, but I did so understanding what that role was. It was to help bring people into the Libertarian Party. It was to help bring people into a libertarian message. It was to use that as a platform for talking about libertarianism. I recognized it for what it was, but having liberty-minded people, having voluntarists, having anarchists, having libertarians that are running for sheriff, you are now, correct me if I'm wrong, you're now the top elected law enforcement official in your county. Is that correct?
That's correct. And there's no other elected law enforcement officials. You can't get rid of your local police chief. He's appointed. All the heads of the federal agencies are all appointed. And the sheriff was the only one that existed in law enforcement at the founding of this country. There was no police departments. There was a guy named Robert Peel who started the first quote unquote police department in England, in London. And then that was replicated in the US, in New York City and Chicago, and now it's gone all across the US. But in the beginning of this country, it was just the sheriff, which is a common law tradition brought over from England. That is the officer of the court. When a judge decides anything in a civil matter or a criminal matter, it's up to the sheriff to be the arms and legs of the court to actually implement his orders in a tangible world. Like if you said you're going to buy a guy's mule for $100, he gives you the mule, you never pay him the $100, they go to the judge gives a writ of execution to the sheriff, and he goes and retrieves the mule and returns it to the rightful owner. But I just gave Jo Jorgensen a tour of the border, and I've talked to her and other libertarian groups. Just went to a Tom Woods event up in Las Vegas about how one of the silver linings, Spike, from the last 2 years of all the mandates and the tyranny over the last 2 years, one of the silver linings is I think people have lost all faith in national level politics. They know that it doesn't matter if it's Democrat or Republican, national level politics, you can't look those people in the face. They'll say one thing during their campaign and then do something completely different, when they're office. Like I had Jo Jorgensen over to our ranch house when she was down here, and we talked over all this stuff. So, I think if you're going to have any faith in politics, which I don't have any faith in politics, but if you're going to have faith in politics, it needs to be at the local level. And the sheriff is the only guy where the rubber meets the road that you can actually look him in the face and chew him out. And if he won't talk to you, or if he hides from you, you can throw him out of office. All these other police departments, they're appointed. Like when I was in the DEA, those are appointed positions. When I was the office head in different places around the world, and the same with CBP or FBI or anything else, you can't expect those people to be accountable, and they won't talk to you. It's a funny thing, Spike, here is one of the biggest surprises of me being sheriff. I've been sheriff for a year, and I'm replacing the longest serving sheriff in Arizona. So everybody and their brother wanted to run. There's 6 candidates, but I've just finished my first year being sheriff. One of the biggest surprises is all the media interviews. Some weeks I do over 20 interviews a week with all the major national networks, and I speak Spanish, so I do on the Spanish networks too, Telemundo and Univision. The biggest surprise is they don't want to talk anything about what I do in the county. They want me to talk about federal issues, the border, immigration, and all that kind of stuff. You know why? It's because the management in the federal agencies won't do media interviews, and that's by policy. They can't just go to CBP or ICE, Homeland Security, DEA, and do a media interview, because they all have a policy to refer any media requests to the public information officer that's either in Washington or in a regional office in Phoenix. So it's actually given me the opportunity. I never knew this would happen, but I've kind of become the de facto spokesman for border issues, and I've memorized all the statistics, the apprehension statistics and everything, just because the federal officials won't talk to them, and they're all federal issues, and I'm a county sheriff, so those are not my issues. But I wind up speaking on it because I want to be transparent, and I don't want to tell people, no, I'm not going to talk to you because it looks like you have something to hide. So it's kind of, I've fallen into that role just because the feds won't talk to the media about border stuff.
I love it. And you're a sheriff on the border, so who better to talk to, right? I love it. I love it. So obviously, I mean, just the fact that you're doing that on a day-to-day basis is probably doing more to spread liberty than 99.9% of us will ever do. I wanted to talk with you about the COVID restrictions, because you were elected, you said it for about a year. So you were elected right around the time that the COVID restrictions were hitting, or I guess maybe just after? Or was...
Well, no, my campaign was when everybody had done here, they had done mandates where, shut down businesses and you had to wear a mask and all these kind of things. So that was right when I was heavy in my campaign. I did a real, down to earth, knocking on doors campaign. My wife went with me. She wrote thousands of letters to everybody we talked to. So right in the middle of that, and they had just enacted a mask mandate, and they did a candidate forum. And just tell you a little anecdote for all the sheriffs, all the candidates running for sheriff. And the moderator was the chief superior court judge for the county. So he asked questions that people submitted on Facebook. And I knew it was inevitably going to get to the question about the mask mandate, since the sheriff enforces the law. And so all the other candidates got the question before me, and they each had 1 minute to respond. And they all said, yep, ultimately, I'll charge people, I'll arrest them, I will require them to wear a mask. So they got to me. And so then the judge, who was the moderator, asked me, okay, David Hathaway, will you enforce the mask rule if somebody doesn't want to wear a mask? And I said, no, I mean, people may have health concerns. At that point, there had already been studies showing where they'd put masks under microscopes, and they would, have like multiple mold colonies and bacteria colonies, and you're breathing in those things. There had been examples of people operating heavy equipment who had gotten lethargy from hypoxia or reduced oxygen intake, and they had crashed vehicles. There'd been incidents of people operating heavy machinery that had been wearing masks. So I was able to cite some of those things. And I also talked about the constitutional issues too, that at that same time, our county board of supervisors had said, you can't get together with 10 or more people without permission from the county board of supervisors. And they weren't giving any permission. So I made the point during that forum that clearly violates the First Amendment, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion. All the churches had shut down, to say that you can't get together with other people. So the local media just went nuts on me. They tried to crucify me on this. Our local paper wrote a big hit piece on me saying how I'm all wrong and messed up, and masks. There's no indication that masks could be harmful, and everyone should comply with this. And it's funny, like, that article set the record for the most online comments for their paper. They usually get no comments, or maybe one or two comments, but there was over 300 comments. It became a very contentious issue. And then, you know what people told me, Spike? They said after that, you just cost yourself the campaign. You just shot yourself in the foot. You should have gone on the bandwagon. You should have go with the flow. You just cost yourself the election by opposing the mandates. And then, lo and behold, election day comes, and I not only won by a landslide, I had 4 times as many votes as the guy who came in second place. Remember, multiple candidates, the guy who came in second place, I had 4 times as many votes as him. And when people told me you're going to lose the election for going against the mandates, I told them, well, if the voters are that dumb that they're going to vote against me for that, then I should lose, but I think people aren't going to get mad at me for standing up for their freedoms. And then fast forward a little bit, my first month in office was January, and I knew this whole idea of vaccine passports was just around the corner. So I studied up on the law on that. And sure enough, when I was in office 2 weeks in January, mid-January, I got a call from the county attorney saying, hey, Sheriff, do you want to make it mandatory for everybody in your agency that they have to take the shot as a condition of their employment? And fortunately, I had researched all the legal aspects of this, and I said, no, I'm going to abide by the legal principle of informed consent, and the Americans with Disabilities Act and HIPAA, which is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. They both have provisions, medical privacy provisions, where you can't inquire about anybody's medical decisions and you can't compel them to do anything. And of course, the Nuremberg Code indicates those same things. So they said, okay, fine, then you'll save us the trouble of, they said, we will write this up for you. We will write up the legal documents to make it mandatory as a condition of employment with the sheriff's office if you want to do that. And I said no. And that's one of the things I'm proud of, that set a precedent here, because the way the vaccinations were rolled out in Arizona, they were rolled out in 3 phases. And one of the first phases was what they call, law enforcement, first responders, firefighters. So everybody was looking at me. And when I said no, the local fire departments and the police department saw my example and they went along with it. And then I got a call from one of our county board of supervisors upset with this trend that I was causing and saying, do you know that less than 50% of the officers in the local police department are not vaccinated? And he said, I demand to know how many people in your organization are vaccinated. And I told him, I have no idea, because I'm not allowed to ask that. I'm not allowed to ask people's private medical decisions. So yeah, I fought the battle on mask and on the vaccine mandates. And fortunately, I think, like I said, to toot my own horn a little bit, I think I set some good precedents that other people followed in this area.
Exactly. And the thing is, they're mad at you about the low adoption rate for the vaccine. But that's the actual people who wanted to get vaccinated, because you didn't say you're required to do this, you're going to lose your job, bad things are going to happen to you. So when people are trumpeting high vaccination numbers and saying, this is proof that people want the vaccine mandate, no, that compared to areas where it's not mandated, that difference are the number of people who have been forced and threatened and coerced into getting vaccinated, which is why so many vaccinated people don't. So even those who voluntarily chose to get vaccinated, wanted to get vaccinated, were happy to get vaccinated, are against these mandates. So I think it's great. And frankly, when you're in just looking at this politically, when you're in a debate with 6 people and all of them say yes to something and you say no to something, or all of them say no to something and you say yes to something, typically what happened was you actually probably ensured that you were going to get elected, if for no other reason than the people that supported yes are being split out over 6 different candidates. You are the no, you solidified yourself, and you know this, as the I'm not going to make you do things you don't want to do candidate, which for whatever portion of the population, you now had that locked down.
Yeah, and then they say there's a saying, there's no such thing as bad publicity, and you're right. I never came down and said I am against you wearing a mask. My position is it's your decision. I'm not against you getting vaccinated. It's your decision. It's your body. You have bodily autonomy. You have personal sovereignty over yourself as a self-owned individual. So you're right. I didn't say you're a lunatic and you're wrong, and I oppose you wearing a mask. But the problem is, Spike, I noticed here is most of the people that wore a mask, if you talk to them, they didn't really believe in it. They just were going along to get along. They just want to keep their head down and not make any waves, not cause any problems. And I was on Mark Victor's podcast. He's the Attorneys for Freedom, kind of a freedom advocate and attorney. And he asked me the question. He said, well, what about private businesses that want to mandate a mask to enter their business? Are you in favor of that? And I told him, well, yeah, absolutely. But there's a lie in there, because all of the mask mandates here in Arizona and the occupancy mandates, they all had included in it, if you're going to be open, you have to have a sign on your business that says mask required to enter. So you go around seeing all these private businesses with a mask required sign on the outside. What you don't know is, because most people didn't read the mask mandate order, like we had one at the city level and at the county level here. And I read both of them. And they even had a little template in there that you could print out, a little sign that you could print out. It says, you can use this one or you can put up your own sign, but but if you're going to be open during this period, you have to have a sign that says mask required to enter. So I explained to Mark Victor, yeah, if it's legitimate, if the owner really wants you to wear a mask, if that's his market, his preference, he may lose business, he may gain business in the free market. But if it's legitimate what he wants, but I told him, you have to realize, Mark, that here, and he's in Arizona, he's in the Phoenix area. I said, if you read these mandates, they required the business owner to have that sign requiring a mask. And if you don't know that, you will think all these private businesses want you to wear a mask, but they had to do it to be open.
Exactly. And that creates this illusion of popular consent for something when it's the literal opposite. They're being forced to do something. A similar dynamic with segregation during the especially coming into the 1950s and 1960s in the South. The reason that they were having to so brutally enforce those restrictions, those segregation restrictions, particularly the requirement that whites and non-whites be separated, is because an increasing number of businesses didn't care. They're like, I don't care who comes here. And so it was actually the fact that the state was having to enforce that because that was becoming less and less popular.
And I mentioned that in my book. In my book, I talk about the whole Rosa Parks situation, that wasn't private bus companies wanting black people to sit in the back of the bus. Those were government ordinances and requirements that said that, because the private market will solve those problems. If there's a demand, the market will meet the demand. They won't just automatically exclude all black people to the back of the bus. There would be companies that welcome them to sit wherever they want on the bus if you let the market do it. But the market wasn't allowed to function. But people, if you look at the typical kind of leftist argument about the Deep South and the restrictions, they'll say that the individuals, the businesses, were prejudiced and wanted to hold black people down. But if you look at it, it's always the state. It's the same thing with fugitive slave laws in the North. Slavery would have fallen apart by itself, without any kind of a civil war, as it did in many other parts of the world. If we didn't have fugitive slave laws in the North, in the mid 1800s and the 1860s, if we didn't have these laws that says, if there's a fugitive slave that arrives in the North, they have to be returned to their rightful owner. That's a government imposed mandate. Now, if you didn't have those government imposed mandates, a slave could go to another non-slave area and could work there, and there would be no way to, repatriate that person to an owner in another state. So it was actually the government keeping slavery going, where it would have fallen apart on its own if there hadn't been those like fugitive slave laws.
Exactly. And it wouldn't have led to the government simply moving chattel slavery from the private sector to the Bureau of Prisons, but that's a whole other subject. Something came up here that I wanted to ask you about, and it is in Arizona. It's an executive order signed by Governor Ducey, called the Enhanced Surveillance Advisory. Can you tell us about this? What is this, and how does this? Oh, there it is.
Yeah, I'm showing it to you right here. It is the creepiest thing, Spike, that you can imagine. Like, we have one of these two-faced governors that wanted to take the CARES Act money and the American Rescue Plan money, but he made a deal with the devil. There's strings attached. And to take all this money, he has to advertise through state mechanisms like highway signs and whatnot to tell everybody to take the shot. But there's a string attached. If you take that CARES Act money, then he is required to share back to the CDC and HHS all the vaccination data for anybody who gets the shot, and it's required every 24 hours. So the way he did this really creepy executive order called that's called the Enhanced Surveillance Advisory, and usually when they have like a creepy draconian thing, they'll name it some euphemistic name like the Patriot Act or the Rainbows and Puppy Dogs Act, something that sounds harmless, but he actually named it for, exactly what it is. And in here, he says that you can't even opt out of this. And this is a Republican governor that wanted to take all the money and tell everybody that they should get the shots and they should wear a mask. But at the same time, he wanted to say out of the other side of his mouth, depending on who he's talking to, that he's against mandates. But here's what it says in here. This is from Ducey's thing, that the CDC and HHS will receive COVID-19 immunization and vaccine Administration information through the Immunization Gateway Project. Every 24 hours, the following information must be provided of all vaccinated individuals: the individual's name, date of birth, gender, residential address, phone number, and vaccine priority group. So he's requiring that it be shared with the CDC and Homeland Security, HHS, Health and Human Services, every 24 hours. And then a really funny part is on the last part here, he says that you can't opt out. There's a medical privacy law in Arizona, which I also have printed out here, because he mentions that medical privacy law. He says, let me read you where he says you can't opt out. Such information sharing may be permitted regardless of whether any individual has opted out of having their individually identifiable health information accessible through the Health Information Organization pursuant to Arizona Revised Statutes 36-3803. So he's saying even if you use the medical privacy statute in Arizona, which is this, section 36, Title 36, section 3803, even if you do that, and what does that say? It says an individual has the right to opt out of having his individually identifiable health information accessible through a health information organization by providing notice as explained in the Health Information Organization's Notice of Health Information Practices. So he said, even if you take advantage of that state law in Arizona that says you have the right to opt out because you have 100%
of anything
autonomy over your own health, 100% health privacy under that Arizona law 36-3803, Ducey says right here that, you cannot opt out even under that provision. Why? Because the deal he made with the devil, the strings that is attached to getting that CARES Act money, is that he has to populate this national database. And, not to get too much into the conspiracy theory angles of this, but you can see where that's going through, Spike.
Oh, gosh.
They found through a health issue, they found a way to create a national database or a social credit score. So if anybody can succeed in making a digital currency rather than just, allowing cash transactions to continue, this is a way that they are creating this national credit score. Any governor that took this money is required by the CDC as one of the strings attached to share every 24 hours all the vaccine data, not just generic data, not what they would call metadata, but your actual date of birth, your address, your phone number, required to share all that personal information about you. So, people talk about, in the future, like, social credit score, digital currency. People will talk about the mark of the beast, and, you can't, unless you have your pre-approved, number code, you're not going to be allowed to buy or sell or trade or anything like that. And you wonder, like, how would they accomplish that? Well, this is how they accomplished that. And Governor Ducey, a Republican governor, just did this right out in the open through executive order. It was done different ways in different states. But the bottom line is any state that took that money has to share this information with the feds.
And the thing is, for those who are thinking, this is a vaccination thing and maybe they're going too far with this and they broke their own rules. But to go to that next step of saying this is going to could potentially be used to create a greater or wider database and use it as a social credit score system. If you're doubting this, you don't understand how government works. Government creates the thing using this pretext. And now they have this, and this is their baseline of power. And then through mission creep, it just keeps growing. So they already have this database. It's implemented in all or most of the 50 states already. They already have a good sizable percentage of the population in it. It is not that much for them to go, we already have this database that's being updated every 24 hours. It's got everyone's address. It's got everyone's name on it. It's got all their info. It's even got their vaccination information. We could just start requiring that everything is on this and requiring that everyone be on it. It's already all the mechanism and infrastructure has already been put in place through the CARES Act and the
and they could sell it as something that makes life easier, that it makes it easier for you to file your taxes because they know what you bought. If it was digital currency, which I think is the next step, then they could see where you spent money, where if there's something like sales tax or a value-added tax or income tax or a businessman talking about expense deductions to offset his income. All of it would be right there. And they say, oh, there'd be a lot easier. You wouldn't have to do as much record keeping for auditing and whatnot. But the other side of the coin is they could just shut it off and say, no, you're a criminal, or you have illegal income. You're a drug dealer. That income you have is not legitimately obtained. You should not be able to spend that to buy a Ferrari or a Corvette. Or you bought this house over here, and if you used your digital currency, then they could calculate the capital gains tax. When the government inflates the money and devalues the money, they can call that a windfall for you, when your house that's still worth the same in relation to other tangible goods like gold, silver, or a bag of potatoes, it's still worth the same. But in inflated currency, it's worth a lot more. And then they could capture and take that capital gains from you, just because every transaction went through a digital network. I know it's something the state would really want to do. It's not a fantasy or a conspiracy concept. That would allow them to snoop on every transaction. And they're already upset that there's cash transactions. You go to the swap meet, you go to the flea market, you buy a guy's car, you buy a gun, you buy whatever, you buy raw milk that's not been pasteurized like the government wants you to do, and you can still get away with it now. But if they could clamp down on that, and I think hopefully Americans are smart enough to push back at that point. But frankly, Spike, I've been kind of disappointed in our fellow Americans, because I live in a big Western state, and these Western states have the reputation of being pioneers and frontiersmen and the land of the free and the home of the brave. And I looked around me, and everybody just cowered and went along with this. They shut down their businesses. They shut down their churches. They started wearing the mask. And there was, in most cases, there wasn't a guy pointing a gun at you making you do it. It was all self-imposed. And I was disappointed, like, what happened to this rugged individualism, and especially out here in the West, these big Western states where they have this reputation for, freedom and the cowboy mentality, the frontier mentality, all the John Wayne movies that were made out here in this county that I live in. And I was disappointed that just people caved in with, not even a whimper. And, it's kind of funny, speaking of churches, a lot of the churches in this area did a lot of big talk and bluster before 2020 came along that said, they're never going to shut us down. They're never going to stop us from following God. In some foreign oppressive countries, they're not allowed to meet and get together. That will never happen to us. They'll have to drag us out of here. And yet they all shut down. They all just willingly shut down and think, well, we don't want to violate social distance. And so, the First Amendment just went out of the window. But these churches around here that would talk about how brave they are and that, they're the last stand against tyranny. No, when the tyranny came, they just all caved in and shut down.
Yeah. And that's the problem. And it is a cult. And I talk a lot about this. To pretend that we're going to get libertarians elected to office by tricking everyone in a debate, and we say the thing, and then we get elected and we trickle down liberty on everyone, they will immediately demand that we do that the people that we replaced did, because that's what they know. Because we don't have a culture of liberty in this country, certainly not anymore. Maybe in pockets, maybe in certain subcultures and in different communities and things like that, and certainly in the value-based community that is the liberty movement. But by and large, we don't have that.
Yeah,
and so I want to go. No, go ahead.
No, that's exactly what I told Angela McArdle last week. She's running for kind of under the Mises Caucus, the chair of the LNC, Libertarian National Committee. And I told her, look, politics is not the answer. There's the political method and there's the economic method. The political method is fraud, coercion, and theft. The economic method is voluntary transactions. That's what we want. But I told her, since kind of people have lost faith in national politics, maybe if you get this position as the LNC chair, you should encourage candidates to file for every position, if it's dog catcher, city council, everything, not so that they can win and use a billy club over the head of their neighbor, but so that they can have the media platform to talk about liberty. Because I know here in my area, if you just file the papers to be a candidate, even if you don't spend any money on your campaign, all the media outlets will give you free pet press. The local paper will give you a full page to talk about your issues and what's important to you. The TV stations will feature you. So you're doing it not to win the position. Like, let's say you did win the position, well, fine, you can abide by the principles of liberty, you can go against all the coercive government stuff.
Exactly.
But the purpose is not really to get the political victory. But if you file candidates for all these positions, you can at least get that soapbox, that bully pulpit, the media platform where you can start talking about voluntary exchanges and the advantage of voluntarism rather than coercive transactions.
Oh, actually, absolutely 100%. And if they are elected like you were, then they can actually put their ideas into practice on the political sphere of saying, no, I'm not going to do anything about that. I'm going to leave you and trust you to fix that. And I'm not going to put you in a cage over it. So I wanted to end by talking about the concept of nullification. And in my mind, there are kind of two main forms of nullification. Obviously, there's jury nullification, which is a juror being able to decide, I don't know or care if the person in front of me is guilty of the crime that they're being accused of committing. I might even think that they did it, but I don't think that should be a crime. I don't think it's just that it's a crime. So I'm simply going to vote not guilty. But there's also nullification that can happen at different levels of government. Probably one of the most explosive and successful examples has been the increasing decriminalization, legalization of both recreational and medical cannabis, despite the fact that at the federal level, it is still every bit as illegal as it was in the 1960s, 70s when the war on drugs started. It's still the same level of what is it, Schedule 1? It's still at the highest level of illegality, and yet the majority of Americans live in either a city, county, or state where it is at least partially legal to consume marijuana in some way. Now, we're seeing now immigration sanctuary states. We're seeing Second Amendment sanctuary states. We're seeing this growth. It's often as a result of partisan anger at the president who's in charge at the federal level. Whatever it takes, we're seeing that there is this kind of popular movement in many cases. We're seeing defend the guard legislation is becoming more and more popular. I wanted to get your thoughts on that, on the activism. I agree with you that it's the market is going to get us out of this. I think largely blockchain is going to get us out of this, or I shouldn't say get us out of this, but a lot of our solutions are going to be found in the market, and it's going to be a no-brainer that that's a better solution than anything that's going to come from the political sphere. But from a defensive or harm reduction standpoint in the political sphere, what are your thoughts on using nullification as a means of kind of hedging in at the federal and state level the tyrannical laws that they're trying to impose?
Yeah, there's a great question, Spike. There's a mistaken concept out there that the courts, the judiciary, are the final arbiters of everything, that whatever they say, whatever the Supreme Court says, that's the last word on the subject. But it was never intended to be that way with the balance of powers of the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislative branch. Each one of them has the ability to nullify an unconstitutional edict or proclamation of the other one. Like, for example, say that there's some illegal proclamation about guns, about gun control that violates the Second Amendment. Even if it comes from the Supreme Court, even if it comes from Congress, the executive branch can still say, no, that's unconstitutional. I'm not going to enforce that, like I did with the mask mandates and the occupancy restrictions violated the First Amendment freedom of assembly. But people don't know that. Ever since Marbury versus Madison, it's kind of grown to the point where everyone thinks, now, judiciary has a final word on this. They're the arbiters of constitutionality, but no, the legislature can override what the judiciary does. If the judiciary says you can't do this, or you must do that, or you have to bus children from this district to that district, whatever they say, the legislature can override that and say, no, we can rein you in just like you think you can rein us in. And then ultimately the executive branch doesn't have to enforce something from the legislative branch or the judicial branch. But yeah, you're exactly right. And I have done that, and I have stood up to things that have come in from other levels of government. This isn't exactly along the lines of what you're saying, but for example, here in this state, the National Guard, the Governor Ducey has tried to, he is term limited. So he's leaving the governor position. He's had 2 terms there, and he plans to run for president. So what's his strategy? He wants to be exactly like Donald Trump. Talk everything like Donald Trump, the border, the wall, the wall, the border, the border. So even if it's not merited, even if there's not, like my crime rates down here in my county are lower here on the border than the crime rates in Tucson and in Phoenix, and lower than the average for the whole state of Arizona. Very family-oriented people, just soft-spoken, hardworking people here. And I got 9 children, Spike, and I feel much happier my children walking around in my community on the border at night than if they were in Tucson or Phoenix. But back to the nullification thing, that governor said, well, I'm going to declare an emergency on the border. The federal government has not declared an emergency on the border, but I'm going to declare an emergency on the border, and I'm going to send the National Guard. I'm going to militarize the border, send troops to the border, guys in camouflage, Humvees, Army equipment. I'm going to militarize the border. And I knew that our local merchants were opposed to that kind of idea, making this into East Germany and militarizing the border, troops in the street, guys on the corner standing with machine guns. So I got a call from the general in charge of all the National Guard forces in Arizona saying, look, Governor Ducey wants me to call you and ask how many National Guard troops do you want in your county? Because I'm the chief law enforcement officer for the county, so I can say no, or I can say yes. And I told him, no, I don't want any. I don't want any National Guard troops militarizing this county here. And what it was is Governor Ducey trying to make points, political points, so he can run for president, saying that he's opposing Biden. Biden is saying, oh, we don't have an emergency on the border, but Ducey is saying, yes, we do. So I was able to, maybe the word nullification isn't proper in this context, but I was able to say no and stand up for something that I knew that would do harm for our community. It would dissuade tourism. It would hurt the local merchants, hurt business. A lot of people like to come to the border and shop and whatnot. So I said no to that. And one of the other sheriffs, two of the other sheriffs said yes. And then another one of the border sheriffs, there's 4 border sheriffs, 4 border counties, said no also. And this is, Governor Ducey was going to charge the Arizona taxpayers for this deployment of the National Guard. In most cases of an emergency, a hurricane, an earthquake, if the governor activates the National Guard, he can get reimbursed by the federal government because the federal government will declare a parallel emergency to fit the state declared emergency. But Governor Ducey said, no, we're going to the taxpayers of Arizona are going to pay for this many tens of millions of dollars to militarize the border, not knowing what he's talking about, that we have very calm, low crime communities in my county along the border. So like I said, maybe that's not a perfect example of nullification, but it was my ability to stand up to something that another branch of government, another aspect of government was trying to impose on me, just like I did with the mask.
It is actually a very good example of nullification in that, well, first of all, you were choosing to nullify, what he was trying to implement in your county, but also it was the act of electing you as sheriff that was an act of nullification against. If I'm in your county and I vote for you as sheriff, which I 100% would, I know voting for you doesn't just mean, after hearing what you have to say, doesn't just mean I don't have to worry about mask mandates or vaccine mandates. I know that across the board, when something is tyrannical, when it is violating the rights of the people, that you're going to say, no, we're not going to do that. And that is my act of nullification by voting for you, nullifying or making it at the very least more difficult, because part of nullification is that when you have a Second Amendment sanctuary, cannabis sanctuary, decriminalization of drugs, it usually also comes with an order that the police in that area can't cooperate with federal authorities and sometimes with state authorities to enforce those laws at the state or federal level, making it functionally impossible for especially the feds to try to enforce that. It's still against federal law to violate certain certain gun control laws at the federal level in Missouri, for example. But the ATF announced we can't really do anything. We might be able to do a raid here or there, but we can't really effectively enforce federal gun laws in Missouri anymore because they tied the hands of the police there and said you can't enforce it. So that's another example of that.
It's the same in Arizona. Like the NRA ranks all 50 states on what have the best gun laws. Invariably, Arizona is number 1 because we don't have any permit requirement for open carry or concealed carry. You can own any kind of a weapon. There's no state law against, say, like owning a machine gun or anything. There would still be the federal law where you have to pay the $200 transfer tax, but there's no ammunition restrictions. You can own any kind of ammunition and, sawed-off shotguns. None of that's illegal at the state level. So we have just a little pitch for Arizona for any of your viewers who are thinking about Arizona. Like, we have absolutely great, the best gun laws in the U.S. here, what you could call constitutional carry. And you're exactly right. If ATF tries to come in and do something and get a local sheriff or a police chief to contribute officers to a task force to do something, if it's against state law, they're very likely to not get the assistance. And I don't know if you know this, but most federal agencies do almost everything they do through state and local officers in a task force. Like when I was in DEA, that was it. Like 90% of our personnel were state and local officers that are part of a federally run task force, where the federal agents are just kind of administrators of the task force.
Yep, exactly. That the numbers are in the actual state and local enforcers that are being, for lack of a better word, deputized to do that work, or they're part of a task force to be able to do that. And if it becomes either illegal or just too unpopular for them to help with that enforcement, then federal law in that federal law or those federal restrictions effectively become nullified in that area in any real enforceable way. And you know, that's, I think, as libertarians, you know, you said it, we're going to have to at least start locally in working on nullification. I would love to see a libertarian sheriff project where we focus on finding sheriffs who have people who are similar, like-minded thoughts as you, who run for sheriff in their communities, get elected, and demonstrate what it looks like when you don't have a police state telling you how to live your life.
Yeah, I wish there was a group like that.
Fighting against the people in power outside of it.
Yeah, like something like a Libertarian Sheriff's Association would be great. There's something called the Constitutional Sheriffs and Police Officers Association, CSPOA. But on a lot of things, they take the very maybe neocon hardline on drug war, on different things like that, where they're very statist in certain areas, whereas they're not advocating the voluntarism but I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, no, I think it should be a project that we do, and it wouldn't take more than a few. We could have 5 or 10 sheriffs across the country demonstrating on a regular basis, this is what not having tyranny over your head looks like. And invariably, those are also going to become safer communities. Those are going to become more prosperous and happy communities. They're going to be where people flock to get away from the tyranny in the county next door. A lot easier to move from county to county than from state to state, right? So a lot of people within the state voting with their wallets and their feet to come there. I think it's a great thing. So I really appreciate your time, and I thank you for coming on. Before I let you go, I want to give you a chance to give any last thoughts that you have, anything that we didn't get a chance to discuss, anything you want to promote that's coming up, anything you want to say, for as long as you want to say. Sheriff David Hathaway, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'll give some real easy contact information. I don't mind getting emails. Sometimes people hide from the personal contact information, but let me first of all just give out a real easy email. It's just Sheriff David Hathaway at gmail.com. No weird characters, no weird punctuation, just Sheriff David Hathaway at gmail.com. Any of your listeners, feel free to reach out at me. Things I have coming up, I'm going to be participating one of the presenters in the Tom Woods School of Life. Any of you guys that are part of that, like talking about Arizona, the advantages, disadvantages of living in Arizona, some of the things we discussed, the climatic regions, the possibilities for living off the grid, the political climate, the gun laws, the homeschooling, like we've homeschooled all 9 of our children, things like that. He's kicked off this program where he's getting different presenters to come in and speak to his group on different topics to try to get a little away from just the libertarian theory and get more into the practical aspects of how we can create like a parallel society. So I'm going to be participating in that. And that's about it. I have written a lot of articles for LouRockwell.com. I've written articles for the Libertarian Institute, so you can go search for my name on those websites and find a lot of the things I've written. But it's been great being on your show, Spike. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And thank you for coming on. I'd love to have you on again in the future to talk more about all sorts of different issues. So hopefully we can do that in the future. But I really do appreciate you coming on. David, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Spike. It's been great.
Wasn't that amazing? Imagine that. Imagine having sheriffs like that across the country. dozens of them, or even well over 100 of them, where there are these pockets of liberty where when at the state level, at the federal level, or even at the city level, we didn't really get into that with this, but there were certain things that the county and local cities were needing help enforcing. And he says, no, we're not doing that. That violates their rights. Knowing that the only way that sheriff's department is going to be used is to protect the people's lives, rights, and property. If you had enough of that, it doesn't really matter what they pass, because they can't do anything about it. They can't stop those elected sheriffs, those elected officers, highest law enforcement officers in their counties, from just saying, no, you can't do that here. You can do that in that county over there if they're okay with it. If the sheriff over there is okay with that, that's fine. Not here though. And as I said before, or as I said during the interview, as people flock to the places where there's more freedom and as a result more prosperity, more liberty, and all of that, there's more safety and better education, all of that. That's going to show how that works. And I think we're going to be talking a lot more about that in the future. We need to have libertarian sheriffs. I think that's some seriously low-hanging fruit. There are plenty of counties where we could get someone in who runs on whatever the latest thing is of that time. I'm not going to enforce this, whatever that thing is that people are mad about. Get elected on that and demonstrate what a libertarian sheriff would look like. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I enjoyed you, and I enjoyed all of your comments, and I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Be sure to tune in tomorrow at 8 p.m. for the Writer's Block. Matt Wright is going to have Christine Kusler-Womack on his show. She's with the York County, Pennsylvania Libertarian Party, and she's going to talk about everything that's going on there. She is also running for chair of the Libertarian Party of Pennsylvania, and they're going to be talking about all sorts of stuff happening in Pennsylvania. Their convention, which I will be at, will be next weekend. But this weekend, if you are anywhere near Melbourne, Florida, come on out. Go to the Libertarian Party of Florida's website. I always forget to do this. What is the Libertarian? I think it's lpflorida.com. Nope. Hold on. If you go to the Libertarian Party of Florida's website at lpf.org, lpf, Libertarian Party Florida.org, you can sign up to become to join the Libertarian Party of Florida convention. I will be there Friday night, and I'll actually be there Friday in the afternoon and Friday night. I am doing a panel with Justin Amash talking about libertarian messaging, and then I will be hosting the dinner on Friday night. Then on Saturday, if you are anywhere near Dothan, Alabama, then come on out and go to the Libertarian Party of Alabama website, Libertarian Party Alabama, by going to lpalabama.org. Do the rope-a-dope on me. I thought it was... Anyway, lpalabama.org, and you can sign up for their convention, and I will be there at that on Saturday, and we're having a concert featuring Afro Man, that Afro Man, the rapper, and a bunch of other entertainers, including me, the greatest rapper alive, Spike Cohen. I'm not a rapper, but I will be there, and we'll be hanging out Saturday night, so come on out and see me there, and then Sunday night, I'm going home. So you can't. I'm not having anyone over. I'm sorry. But join us next Tuesday for another exciting episode of the Muddy Waters of Freedom, where Matt Wright and I parse through the week's events like the chipper little monkeys we are. And then join me right back here on Wednesday, same Spike place, same Spike time, for another fantastic episode of My Fellow Americans. Folks, thanks again for tuning in. I'm so happy to have you here. Can't wait to talk to y'all again. Hope to see you soon, maybe in Melbourne, Florida, or Dothan, Alabama. Thank you again, guys. I love y'all. I'm Spike Cohen. I did that wrong. I'm Spike Cohen, and you are the power. God bless, guys.
my kin, though I view the world through another's iris. If you slide in my kicks, it might fit. We might just unite and come together, become hybrid, at the least slightly like-minded. Indeed, the life I've lived brings light to kindness. All you need is a sign. Put a cease to the crimes, put an ease to the minds like mine. Sometimes darkness is all I find. You know what they say about an eye for an eye in a time when the blind lead the blind. Who am I to deny I would cry when a loved one dies? I recognize that body outside, but the holes in the body that was alive. Now confined to a chalk outline. Find out how, but you never know why. It ain't even make it to the news at 9. It ain't even make it to the news at 9. That's my sister, mother, father, brother, son. That's one of mine. All these tears, I close my eyes, open up the only find. I'm in line. There's a pointless murder